Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of the Culture and Cannabis podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. This guy hails from the state of Pennsylvania. He came to Nevada in 2001. Since then, has helped legalize cannabis in Nevada. Has started one of the biggest companies in Nevada cannabis. Does a bunch of different consulting. The one and only Evan Marder. Sorry, I wanted to say I was in my head we had just talked about it before on the camera, and it was in my head, and I had the anxiety of saying it wrong, and I didn't want to come off by saying it wrong.
It's all good. You nailed it. Yeah. Thank you for that awesome introduction.
You had one job.
Literally one job.
You know, it's funny. I actually worked with a guy for like 2 years, and he kept calling me Evan Mater. He never stopped calling me Evan Mater. So, yeah.
Sorry about that.
So you're not the first one to fuck up his name. So
not at all. Not at all. It's a weird last name. Not many people have it, so totally cool.
So tell us about yourself. I kind of gave a brief introduction, but anything that I didn't touch on?
Well, not really. I mean, I grew up I was born in Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. Grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, which is basically Pennsylvania. It's 15 minutes south of Philadelphia. I moved out here, like you said, in 2001 with a company called Kahunaville that was in Treasure Island for many years. I was a flair bartender on the Strip for quite a while. And then I started a cannabis company in 2014 called Matrix NV. Was fortunate enough to get it launched. And yeah, you
here we
pretty
are
much
today.
said it all. Here we are today.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, if you guys aren't from Vegas and you don't, I mean, just about everybody knows who Evan is, and you've done you've done a ton of work, right? And I appreciate what you've guys done, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
But
happy to be here.
Yeah, I think the thing about you that I love so much is kind of like you have like this vibe of like you're the people's champ, right? Like you're just kind of like one of these normal guys, but you got past the licensing part from, like you said, being a licensed bartender and all that stuff. It's just been incredible what you've created, and I mean,
yeah. What's so kind of funny too is like literally I have written down people's champ, like because the first time I met you was with Jason Sturtzman, and I was like, this is the nicest CEO I've ever met in my life. Like this guy is like so happy and just very welcoming, right? Like I fucked up your name at the beginning of the podcast after I did it, and you just smiled and laughed about it.
All good. I see. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. You know what I mean? And I always try to see the positives in everything, the humor in a lot of things. And yeah, I have a different approach in a lot of ways than normal CEOs, normal managers would. Mainly because I was the guy behind the line for many, many, many years, and so that's a unique perspective to have when you come from a working class family, and then, I was blue collar my whole life. And so, that's when I say I feel very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. I truly do. And when you say like the people's champ or, whatever, those were like some of the best compliments I could ever get, the people's, that's all I want to be as part of the community. And, I'm no different, and I don't see myself as any different. I'm just very fortunate to be where I'm at. And I have a passion for something that a lot of people have a passion for. So,
nice.
That's awesome.
And we're talking about cannabis, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's what we're talking about there.
Well, let's back up a little bit. So, I mean, how old are you? Can we
I'm 49.
49?
Yeah.
Whoa, you're 49?
Yeah, I know. Cannabis, dude.
I thought you were way younger than JC, honestly.
If I grow my hair out, I look older.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I've been smoking weed since 16, and I think that might have a little bit to do with it. I don't know.
It probably does, honestly.
I think so.
So how old were you when you moved to Vegas?
I was 31.
31,
yeah.
So, what was going on in your life?
So
31,
It's a good question. So I was working for a company called Kahunaville at the time, which started in Wilmington, Delaware as a nightclub. That eventually morphed into a restaurant chain / nightclubs. We had restaurants all over the country. So I had started there as a doorman, and slowly worked my way up to eventually I had the title of director of operations when I left there. I had that position for about 2 years before I left. It was a job where I worked 70 to 80 hours a week, especially in the summertime, because we had a huge deck there that held 5,000 people and held major concerts on. So my summers were just, work. Then we were approached by MGM to open up a restaurant in Treasure Island. And long story short, I said, man, that would be awesome to move out to Vegas. I'm single, I'm 31. and I'm kind of burnt out from this, and I figured I'd go out and bartend for a while, and then get back into management eventually, grow up again eventually. But it was just too much fun, and I was in the union, the culinary union, and it was good money, and it was a great job. I loved doing it for 14 years. I had to actually learn how to flair, throw bottles around and stuff. Like everybody resorts to Tom Cruise and cocktail, and I had to hear that literally every day, 5 days a week. Oh, you're like Tom Cruise and cocktail. But but it was cool, and I had a great shift and a great life for a while, but then I decided that bartending wasn't going to be it for me, and this opportunity popped up, and I decided just to go for it.
Nice. So Kahunaville, that's in the Mirage, right?
No, it was in Treasure Island.
Treasure
It's
Island.
actually no longer there. They closed down in 2016.
Wasn't it back kind of like tucked away in the corner by the
Correct.
escalators there?
Yep, it was right across from Mystere.
And so you're actually, did you ever go there, Tony?
When he texted me the name, it sounds really familiar, and I probably have been there.
So it was one of these bars, right? Let's describe it a little bit. It's like
a tropical
super
oasis
tropical.
of food and
yes.
fun. That's what it was. That was the mission statement.
When you walk into this restaurant, it's like normal hostess stand, but there's this huge square bar, and then you're met with the bars basically have like two bartenders on each side, right? And there's like
in busy times. Yep.
And these are the baddest flair bartenders you've probably ever seen. They're literally juggling, like throwing, everything around. And you were doing.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something funny about that. I actually worked the day shift in that huge bar. It turned out over time, I ended up running that entire bar by myself.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane because I didn't have a bar back. But it was great money, man. So if you're not sharing your tips with anybody, man, you have a bar to yourself and you're making union wages, you can kill it. And that's what I was doing. But they slowly put all the more and more work on top of me, and it was tough because I didn't have a bar back, and we ran food to that bar. People ate, so I was flaring, making drinks, throwing bottles around, running back to the kitchen, grabbing food. It was nuts, but it was cool.
What level of flair bartender were you? Didn't they have levels?
Oh God,
right?
yeah, I was. No, and I'm not going to sit here and lie because some of my buddy flair bartenders might sit here. I was like one of the worst, to be honest with you. I was actually. So it's funny because like people would come to my bar and think I was like this flair god because I could do working flair and I could do exhibition flair. We had to put a 5-minute show together because we would do shows behind the bar. So I had a solid 5-minute routine that I could do, but I was never a guy flipping around 4 bottles. I could barely juggle 3. But yeah, you have guys doing stuff now that are just like, look up on YouTube, look up Danilo Oribe, Oribe. Just look at him. If you want to see what flair is, Danilo Oribe, he is phenomenal. He's one of the best guys I used to work with. He's just the guy coming to my head, but he's one of the top 3 in the world. So
I remember like Christian Delpeche.
Christian's another one. Yeah, all good friends of mine.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really, really cool because in 2001, flair was just getting really popular. There was actually a lot of money and a lot of sponsorship behind it, and there was literally one bar in all of Las Vegas doing it called Carnival Court.
Yeah.
And then we opened up, and all the people that worked at Kahunaville had been recruited through flair competitions. And so these guys had been competing with all the people over at Carnival Court for years. And so it was like this big tight-knit community that I was introduced to when I moved out here. So it was really cool because I had the family of Kahunaville, but then also this whole body of other people that were in the flair world too. And it was just awesome, for years and years up until 2008. It was really popular. There was competitions everywhere. People made a lot of money doing them. I did some competitions, never made any money doing it, but yeah, like those guys like Delpeche, and they were making 6 figures just touring, doing competitions, and barely even working.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, but then in 2008, when the economy tanked, Sky Vodka pulled their sponsorships, and like all these other companies. Then these guys started competing in Russia and nightclubs and shit like that, and then they started getting robbed by the actual owners of the places they compete in. So it kind of just fell off. But they're still all doing it. Christian even did a commercial for Chili's.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah.
I love Chili's.
Yeah,
I do too.
That 2 for $20 used to be my shit. Still is, low key. If it's on Uber Eats, I'm buying it.
It's funny, they had him as a chef, and this is a dude that probably never cooked a thing in his life, but he was a master flair bartender. But they had him throwing around like vegetables and knives and doing he's just so talented that he could throw around anything and make it look good. So that's what they did.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
So like back then, and working, in Las Vegas in the union, right? It's strict, right? So there's
oh yeah,
drug testing, to be in the union bartender. you could be a bartender, I'm pretty sure, for 20 years. Anywhere else in the world, you move to Vegas, you have to join the union, you have to go back to school,
Yep.
right?
I was grandfathered in. I was lucky there.
Nice.
Oh,
Because,
really?
Yeah, because we were opening a new restaurant in Union House, and if you were transferred as an employee, you got to be grandfathered into the union. So I never had to take all those union classes, man, because they're a bitch, and you're educated highly. It's almost like a master's degree in alcohol when you go through those union classes. So I took some over time, but I never actually had to go through it all. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I actually went through those
Did you?
courses. Yeah.
Yeah, they're tough.
They're tough. You think you know something, right? And then you come to Vegas to bartend. It's a totally
whole different world.
ballgame.
I dealt with the health department back in Delaware a lot, but it's nothing like it is here. When I tell you, and you can go into any restaurant in Las Vegas and see the grade of, in the establishment. Most of them have to be an A. In casinos, they all have to be an A. They have contracts with all the, any decent casino, MGM definitely has it going on where you have to have an A rating constantly. And if you get knocked down to a B, if you stay there for a certain amount of time, they can yank your license and kick you out of the hotel. So it's, these restaurants in the casinos, they have to be on top of their game. And I can tell you that the Clark County Health Department is no joke. Like when you get inspected and they have something wrong and they plaster it on like the Channel 13 News, and I mean it's a bitch, man. So you have to be on top of your game. And there was a lot of bad habits you develop over time as a speed bartender or back on the East Coast. Like it's just pumping out drinks and you're 10 deep and you got your hand in your ice all night and doing all kinds of shit. And you come out here and you're just like, okay, I have to
have to use a night scoop.
Yes, for everything I do. And there's a lot of rules, but I got really good at that too here, which is great. It makes you more of a professional. If you work in a restaurant on the strip, usually, especially as a bartender that's a union, you are a professional. You're a professional career hospitality industry person.
Yeah. Skilled labor. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's something to it.
So, I mean, so you smoking cannabis this time in your life? Or?
Oh God, yeah.
So are you been smoking weed your whole life?
Since I was 16.
Let's talk about your first experience with cannabis.
Actually, my first experience was 13, and I threw up, and
Damn.
I hated it because it was probably like some seriously bad lumbo, and it was really. I remember it being really harsh on my throat, and I literally puked as soon as I did a hit. So I stayed away from that. I'll tell you, I lived in Delaware, and so my house was in Delaware, and my backyard bordered Pennsylvania. And so everything behind my house was undeveloped. So it was all woods. It was all like a big forest back there for miles and miles. I grew up in that forest. But I remember like my mom talking to one of her friends, and she was saying, those kids are smoking pot back in the woods. And I was like, how the hell are they smoking a pot? Like, like that's literally my first memory of cannabis. And then when I was 13, I found it in my dad's drawer and in his bedroom, and I was like devastated because I thought like my parents weren't going to be able to take care of me anymore because weed was like the devil. And I had a babysitter at the time. It was good. Actually, she was like 16, and the girl I grew up with, and she was like, "Don't worry about it. My parents smoke it all the time. My dad's in the bathtub smoking it, and my mom sits in there with him, and they just laugh." And so that was like my early experience. And then at 16. I smoked it with some buddies of mine. That's kind of a long story. I actually used to be really into baseball. And I didn't make the baseball team this year because the art teacher, who was also our baseball coach, hated me. And it's actually kind of funny story. I was in the all-star teams. I was really into baseball. And so growing up, I was pretty good and all my friends were really good. And so I was figuring I'd make the high school baseball team. And I'm up at batting practice and I'm dinging it, man. And like one of the assistant coaches comes over to me. He's like, "Oh, what's your name?" And I said, "Evan Marder." And then I watch him go over to the coach, and he's like pointing at me and like really enthusiastic. And then the coach looks over at me and just says, "Oh no." And literally the next day I was cut. So like that kind of that set me on a weird path because then I started hanging out with a lot of dudes that were into weed and didn't hang out with my friends and started smoking weed. But then I ended up loving it. And I'll never forget at lunch in the cafeteria in high school, a buddy of mine that was on the baseball team, we're sitting there talking. I somehow brought up that I was smoking weed and I really liked it. And he's like, "Well, don't let it rule your life, man." And guess what happened? And that literally stuck with me. Like that stuck with me ever. I can literally see him saying that to me like it was yesterday. And but it did. It did.
Defining moment.
Yeah, it was in a big way.
And I know you mentioned this, but you were growing too, right?
After very soon thereafter, So I was a high school kid. I didn't have much money, none, and my parents were going through a divorce at the time, and I was staying at my house that I grew up in, and my dad had tried growing it over the years back in the woods and didn't do it. He couldn't grow in Delaware because it's clay-based soil, and it just wouldn't grow there. We didn't know back then. But so in High Times, they had an ad for this thing called a Phototron, and you actually can still buy them to this day. And so I don't remember how I got the money to do it, but I bought a Phototron. And I started growing in like one of the closets in my basement down in my house with just some bag seed. And yeah, I got started that way. And then in the 90s when, because back then there wasn't even indoor lighting, and then in the 90s, you started seeing indoor lighting in the back of the High Times ads. And so we started buying some of those. And they were a lot of fun because those ballasts were like super loud. Like they like that. So try hide and grow, with all these ballasts going on. But that's what we did. We started getting into like that, started growing in basements back east.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So were you growing to sell it? Were you guys trying to hit
Yes.
a lick?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. No, it was all personal use. It was.
So was cannabis kind of like your first dabble into entrepreneurship?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
So I see that, right? I mean, probably,
Yeah.
I was doing some shady stuff back in the day, and I feel very fortunate to be where I'm at, not just because of I'm a blue collar kind of guy, but also because of obvious reasons. I'm not one of the people that ended up in jail for something that I love.
Right.
But yeah. Yep.
And I feel like, a lot of people in the cannabis industry, I can almost guarantee all three of us, at one time was selling it illegally, right? Or, something of that nature.
Yep.
And so I think it's funny to see like the distinguishing of people in the industry who didn't do that before and did do that before.
Yeah.
Do you think that makes a difference?
Absolutely.
Why do you think
it's
that?
just oh God. Well, first off, people, this is kind of a saying that I've been saying a lot lately. Because you're starting to see a lot of organizations starting to be run by people that didn't have that experience before. Yep. And the saying I have for them is they don't know what they don't know. And that is, you don't know those things because you don't have the experience, and you haven't been doing this for years and years, and that's what it takes. It's not like you just don't gain this overnight or years of watching people doing it on a commercial in a commercial setting. Mm-hmm. Part of what I think, I know made Matrix successful was that I was out there pounding the pavement and meeting people and just showing them who I am and and explaining what we're doing but also relating to them, and that's not something that you can just get. It's something that is instilled in you. It's part of who you are.
Oh yeah.
So but as far as like on the professional side of it. I mean, you have to go through the battles of growing this plant to really understand, what it takes to really grow good cannabis. And, and none of us were doing this on a commercial scale before. We were doing it in guerrilla style grows. And you go through a lot of trial and error doing that kind of shit, especially in areas that are humid climates and just tough to grow. And, there's growers out there that have fought battles that none of these people with money could ever understand or experience or go through until they actually get to that point in a commercial setting, and then it's too fucking late. Mm-hmm. So, but then also there's the whole side of it where you got to understand good genetics. And, that's one of the things that I always felt that I brought to the table. I can just look and smell something and know if it's good or not. And, I'm sure a lot of people can, but there's a lot more to it than just that. There's a lot about plant structure, about how it clones, about how it grows, just, so all these little factors go into it that you gain over time. It's not something that, like I said, you can buy or you can just watch people and gain it or watch YouTube or whatever. It takes time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, that definitely shows too. I mean, the Matrix product that you were producing was unbelievable.
Thank
amazing
you.
Product. Everyone in Reno was talking about it. I mean, I was smoking the shit out of your Pax pods.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but when you meet you, right, you get into that, like, I don't care what he produces. I want to buy because of him, right? And I think that's what you just touched on. And I think that's a big thing that's happening.
Part of it.
Yeah, it's happening in the industry, right?
Yeah,
right now.
Definitely. I mean, dude, a lot of people can grow good weed, but there's if there's not a real story behind it too, it's just, it doesn't really separate itself in a way, and that's, I don't like to toot my horn, but I've got a nice story going on, it's been a hell of a ride, and I'm really proud of it, and I feel blessed like a motherfucker, but you can't fake it,
Yeah.
you can't fake it.
No, definitely.
Well, let's dive into it a little bit, right? So you're growing pot, right? As basically a kid, right? So when does it turn into like, something that you really love, right? And it's, when you get into like some of the craft and the mastery of
the growing side of it.
Yeah.
Probably actually in the early 90s. I had a really good buddy of mine that was, he went to Salisbury State University. He was really into science, and we were growing in Salisbury State, and we were just pheno hunting back then, and he was getting seeds from Amsterdam, but way back then, and it was just that side of things. I learned a lot from him early on about the chemistry side of cannabis, and also you gotta understand back then too, there wasn't really fertilizers for it. General hydroponics was kind of on the scene back then, but you would get busted trying to buy that kind of stuff. So, you really had to kind of figure things out on your own. And so, yeah, I would say in the 90s, but then of course in the 2000s, it started getting more popular, and legalization made it more mainstream and easier to obtain and get information about. When the forums popped up online, like Attitude and that kind of stuff, there's a lot of growers forums out there, and those are, you can gain a lot of info from that, and those, you can really seek out really intelligent people on those sites, which is pretty cool. I did that. That's actually part of how I got this started, was talking to people in Colorado just through forums, just understanding what an actual commercial setting was all about. You understand the business kind of in your head, but then you actually start putting it down on paper. You're like, well, how many people do I need to do this and do that? And, what does this cost? What does that cost? And there's just a lot to it. So yeah.
Nice.
Sorry.
Nice.
So you're in 2001, you moved to Las Vegas. You start growing here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty early on, I got a patient card here. And I'll tell you, sorry.
No, dive in.
So I actually, back then was hoping that we would eventually take on the model that California took on, because that was really the only model that there was. It was actually the only model. And how that model was that you had dispensaries being fed by home growers. So I saw that and I was like, oh, okay, that would be fucking awesome. So I had, set up grows here, and I'm just waiting and waiting for dispensaries to come online, and they just never did. In 2010, Dr. Reefer was really popular, and they had a dispensary on what was it, Pecos and like Tropicana. And so I went there and I went there because I heard they had it going on, and I went in, and dude behind the counter is super cool, and I was just like, they had a really good strawberry cough, by the way. Oh God, that shit did. And it was, I'm telling you, it was, no, I'm not going to go there, but anyway. So yeah, I'm talking to him, and I'm like, is this legal? And he's like, well, we talked to our lawyers, and they think we're illegal, and blah, blah, blah. And they were doing a lot of like really cool stuff. They were keeping receipts and all this shit. But then like, I don't know, not much long after that, they all got busted. They all got raided here in 2010, and I wasn't selling any of them or anything like that. And fortunately, so I kind of dodged a bullet there because it just didn't feel right. And I just knew Nevada was not California by then. I'd been living here a while. And so, yeah, so the model never came. It just, but that was my hope back then when we started growing.
Was to hope that it would turn into California.
Correct.
And so that 2010, that's happened. You're still growing. 2014. What was 2012, right? When
2013, they made the laws.
Yeah.
And then in 2014, that's when you actually had people starting to apply for them. They made the laws, and then the application came out in June 2014. Clark County actually put out their basically their license period in April of 2014, which really threw the whole, we won't get into that because we'll talk about it for hours, but that really threw off the whole thing. But that's when it really, I had heard about it in March of 2014, and that's when I was like, fuck it, I'm whatever it takes, I'm going to try to get this done. I had no idea, at that point, what it would take at all. Of course. But yeah, that's when I dived in, and that's when you really started hearing about it here, at least in my point of view, was March 2014.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I grew up I was born and raised in Vegas, and so I remember at that time when people were talking about it and how excited everybody was and when it first passed. And so sorry, we got off track.
All good.
So 2014, you build this business plan for it. Was it initially going to be named Matrix? Is that like how'd that come along?
So I had a buddy of mine out in California that I grew up with. He lived in Soho, New York. We used to get great weed in Soho, and he moved out to California after I had moved out here. And he would always come out, like he would always have business meetings out here in Vegas, and he'd come over to the house and I'd hook him up, and he'd always be like, dude, I'm not seeing anything on this level in Cali, not in New York, not in anywhere. We've really got to get you out there somehow, some way. And I'm like, yeah, great. So when I had the idea, I went to him because he's tied to a lot of venture capitalists in California. He's in the computer and the tech industry, and he knew a lot of, really big people. And so I went to him first with the idea. And so he says to me, well, we need to come up with a name that, isn't really screaming cannabis, because I'm going to bring this to a lot of VC venture capitalists, and they're not going to want to have something that's screaming, marijuana. So he lived in Soho, and he always called me Marder, not Mater. He called me Marder. And so he lived in Soho right across from the Holland Tunnel, and right there next to his loft was this place called Matrix Printing. And this is like before the movie even came out. And so for some reason, like, he just started calling me Matrix instead of Marder. And like, it was obviously from the Matrix Printing thing. And so he just started calling me that. We used to party at his loft. There were some killer parties there. So anyway, so when he says that to me, I'm like, well, Matrix. And he's like, yep, that's perfect. And that's literally how it got started.
Really?
Yep, that's how we came up with the name. It was just
That's
because he
story.
told me, he told me, you don't want something, I probably would have called it Evans Buds or something, he not said something like that. But
that's a smart move.
Yeah, it really was, and it worked. And I was like, oh, that's fucking brilliant. And so that's what we went with. And so that's when he actually, I'm like, well, what's it going to take to get VCs to look at this? And he's like, well, you need to write a prospectus, you need to have a business plan. And, so that's what I started doing. I took his advice, and then he actually connected me to some guys out in California that were running dispensaries and grows out there. He showed them my prospectus, and he calls me on a Thursday night, and he's like, hey man, I met these guys today, and they're funded by Amazon, and they want to meet you tomorrow. I'm like, this is like a Thursday night, and I'm like, tomorrow? He's like, yeah. I'm like, in Vegas? He's like, no, dude, in San Francisco. I'm like, oh, fuck. Okay. So I literally spent, I think, like an insane amount of money on a plane ticket, like $1,000, and flew out and stayed in San Francisco for a night, met these guys in this really cool park. They have this place in San Fran where they have all these like lunch trucks in like a circle, and all these people go there for lunch, I guess, the business district or whatever. And that's where we met. And we hit it off, and they were like, we never saw somebody with a prospectus in the cannabis industry. That's very impressive. like, thanks, man. You came up with that idea myself. So they got very interested in me, and I was making a lot of moves back here. Here's one of the brilliant things I did. Not to toot my horn, but early on.
Toot your horn all day.
That's okay.
That's the whole point of this podcast.
Cool, awesome. So I'm humble. It's hard for me to do that.
We can tell.
So back then, everybody was going to attorneys to get the licenses, and I actually went to this woman named Serena Choi, and Serena was a licensing expert. She wasn't a lawyer, she wasn't anything. She just ran this company called National Licensing Service, where she got licenses for alcohol and gaming, and she decided to delve into it. And I'm like, well, that's fucking perfect. Why would people go to attorneys? Like, this is what she does. Mm-hmm. So I called her. I didn't have shit. I didn't have money. And, to really do this. And I call her up, and I'm like, I'm this big investor, and I'm looking to get into the cannabis industry here. And so I just want to understand a little bit more. And she says, well, the first thing you need is a building, because no one's even, you have to have a building or else you can't apply. You have to have a property. So she said, and that's the biggest challenge right now, because everybody's out there looking for them. So if you can get a building, you're ahead of the game. So I start calling brokers. I had, I think at that point, like 6 brokers, and, brokers work for commission. They're not, paying them up front. So it was perfect. I go to all these commercial real estate brokers and I tell them I'm an investor from Las Vegas and I'm looking to get into the cannabis industry and I need a building. And so I have all these people searching for buildings. But the crazy part of it was they would search through a stack that was an inch thick and end up with nothing. It was like, nobody was renting harsh. They're called harsh real estate. They own like 50% of the commercial real estate in this city. And they said right off the bat that they wouldn't deal with cannabis. So that literally cut out half the leases in this city for commercial real estate. So I was fortunate enough to find a building, and it was a great building in North Las Vegas. And I go and look at the building, and I go to the guy. I'm like, this is perfect. I'll take it. And again, I got nothing. And right. And but in that, what you do is they come up with an LOI, a letter of intent.
Yeah.
And a letter of intent is basically not even worth the paper it's written on. So, I'm like, all right, let's get an LOI going on this place, right? So, and that basically holds the building for you for a period of time. Yeah. And so I had this LOI on a building, and I have these guys out in California. I fly it there, and so I have an actual building to present to them. I don't have shit, but I actually have a building held that I can show these dudes. And so they fly out like that following Friday to Vegas, come stay at the at the Planet Hollywood. And we go out, we look at the building, and they're like, we're in. That's it. Like, we're in, man. So I have the start of it right there. But the whole time, I really wanted the guy that owned Kahunaville, who had become a very close personal friend of mine over the years, and his name is David Tuttleman, and David, has a big family name back east, and I had approached him at the same time I had approached my friend Charles out in California about getting in on this, and David was like, well, I can't, my mom, I think it was his father had just passed away, or his mother, and he couldn't get involved, and his family was too prominent in Philadelphia, couldn't get involved in marijuana, but I'll help, I'll mentor you through. But so I was like, that's great. That's awesome. Cool. But I always really wanted him to get involved with it just because I knew, excuse me, I'm about to burp. There we go. So with his business connections and the type of person that he was, there wasn't really anybody in cannabis like that yet. Mm-hmm. His family was an early investor in Unlimited, which is Victoria's Secret. I mean, these are big people. Mm-hmm. And so David also has an apartment in Vegas, and he happened to be here at the same time as these guys came to visit me, and I showed them the building. So I said to David, I was like, look, man, I'm going to have these guys out here that are looking to invest in me. Would you mind meeting them and just feeling them out for him? He's like, yeah, sure. No problem. So we met him we met him at Planet Hollywood at the Starbucks there with me and these three guys. And he came over there with a yellow notepad, and just wanted to understand the business. So instead of feeling these guys out for me, he actually grilled them about what the actual business was, and was taking notes, and they fed it all to him, and I could see him getting more and more interested in seeing legitimate people, and they told him what kind of money they were making doing it. I'm like, oh, okay. And so after he met them, he called me later on that day, and he was like, you know what, I'm kind of interested. I want to know more about this. So then I brought him to Serena, and I had to pay her like $800 to meet me. And it was the first time, because I was just on the phone with her constantly. She'd never charged me for all that stuff. Yeah. So I had to pay her $800 to meet with David and I. And so David and I go down there, and the first thing she says to me, so have you found a building? And I said, yes. And she says, well, okay. And do you have any information on it? And I actually had the pamphlet on it. So I slide it over to her. It's got a picture of the building and everything. And she says, well, how high are the ceilings? And I was like, they're 24 feet. And she goes, that sucks. I'm like, and David looks at her and he goes, why does that suck? And she goes, because you're going to run out of pot. and I just saw, I literally saw a light bulb go ding right above his head, man. And I was like, see, because that back then everybody was like, this is the golden goose. Everybody's going to have fucking lines around the dispensary that are a mile long. It's going to just kill it. Everything's going to be, this is a pot of gold waiting to happen. Yeah. And so he kind of saw that pot of gold right then and was like, oh, okay, then maybe I should get involved with this. And that's really the start of where he got involved. And by then it was June. Actually, that was
June 2014.
Yeah, that was June 2014. And
so
then
making moves fast.
Yeah, real fast, because the application came out in June and then was due in August.
Shit.
Yeah. And so I had nothing. I had nothing at that point. It just seemed like such a fucking long shot because you had to put together a team. You had to have an expert in the field. You had to like have all this shit plus all of this money. So we started putting together a company, and that was a whirlwind in itself and a story in itself. But yeah, we were fortunate enough, and then we made it to the finish line. I actually handed in. I did the entire application. I handed it in to the United States Postal Service because you could actually mail it. That's the same. That's a government entity, and it was basically the same as handing it into the Department of Health. And so I got it there with 14 minutes left in the day. So yeah, and so Matrix was literally 14 minutes away from not happening because I had to print out those applications were printed out on my home computer. I actually went and bought a second printer, and printed all this shit out. It was 5,400 pages. Oh, yeah, printed, and it had to be on 3-punch recycled paper. And it was so funny because the state's making you go through all this shit. They want it on recycled paper, and meanwhile, I had probably thrown away 15,000 pages because of fucking misprints and just shit that you change and whatever. Yeah, I had 4 trash bags, lawn bags full of just paper.
Jesus.
It was nuts. And I had have my mom, who was on vacation at the time, out here with me, and her boyfriend and my brother all helped me. We had a line of these applications out on my couch, and we're putting them all together and shit like that. And literally, that was the last day.
Oh yeah.
And it came down to that wire, that close. And it was so crazy to me because, the massive investment that was going into Matrix to make this happen was committed to it. And we're talking millions of dollars. So I'm here I am, me, printing this shit out on my home computer at home, printing all this stuff out. This entire weight of this entire project's on my shoulders right now. But yeah, we got it.
What was the feeling when you turned that into the postal worker?
Oh God, it was just relief. It was so relief. Yeah, I went out with Serena actually. Yeah. Serena and I went out and had a drink, and she was like, "You did it, kid." I was I was like, "Oh yeah." I mean, back then you didn't even know. You didn't even know if you were going to get approval. You didn't know if all that work up till that point was even worth, your time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got it.
Yeah, you guys got
it. So in November of 2014.
So November 2014. So then are you in the building at that time? What's going on?
So actually, we lost that building. That was owned by Curtis Trucking, that building, and fuckers. And because I had this building, and then 2 weeks later, because we were committed to it, I actually had the money now. Mm-hmm. And then the landlord's like, sorry, what did he say? He said our shareholders won't approve it. I'm like, oh, you dick. So I had to find another building, and that was an insane process too. But I was lucky enough to find another building. I'm pretty sure it was the last building in Vegas. We were in a bidding war with Essence and Reef for that building.
Really?
Yeah. The same. And it was fortunate because I had gone to their brokers. I found this building on my own. And this is just ignorance at play at its best. So I call these brokers, and I'm like, hey, I want to come look at your building. And they're like, great, so we'll meet you there. And I said, well, I'm represented by so-and-so brokers. Should I bring him? And they're like, no. You can come by your house. We'll represent you. So I'm like, cool. So I go up there. I look at the building. I love it. And, so long story short, the other 2 groups are represented by a broker. So those brokers that represent the building have to split their commission with another broker if they're represented. So it's a 6% total commission split twice, so 3%. But if they have a guy that rents the building that doesn't have a broker representing him, they don't split shit. So they get to keep that 6%. Meanwhile, they're telling me, oh, man, Evan, you're going to win. You're the best. We love you, man, and this and that. And meanwhile, afterwards, I was like, oh, that's why. Yeah. That's probably why. But they're actually still friends of mine. They're super cool guys, and
it's probably what helped the deal make the deal happen, right?
Yeah, and actually, there's a family that owns the building that we're in, and I just hit it off with them too. So we got, it ended up lucky. It worked out really, really, really well there.
So you got the building, November 2014. You're probably ecstatic once you get that license.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's hyped.
Yep.
So then what, do you have a team in place at that time?
Yeah, so we had built a company at that time, and I'm not at liberty to really talk about who they are at this point. But yeah, I mean, they were big people in the cannabis industry, really big people. And they came on, and what I was really fortunate with the team that we built the perfect team, because what we had was we had a great understanding of extraction, because part of the team had already been doing it in California for 8 years, and especially CO2, but also butane, basically everything. We had one guy that's an engineer and one guy's a scientist, and the engineer also had a scientific mind to where he understood extraction really well. But then I also had a plant scientist backing me that was a formulator and just understood the chemistry of the plant much better than I could ever hope to. Graduated from UC Berkeley with a botany degree. And so we have problems. I'm bouncing all this stuff off of these guys in California. And so it was a really nice built-in backdrop that I had going on that I could go to instead of just relying on everything that I had learned over the years. And it worked. It worked really well.
Yeah, well, you can definitely tell within the product, right, when you first tasted it. And I for some reason I have a hardcover book of Matrix at my house. I don't even know how the hell I got it, but
like a lookbook?
Yeah, it's like a lookbook. Yeah. And so I have it on my coffee table, and I just look at it once in a while.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it was so badass just checking it out. And everyone, I don't know if this is what you hear, but I hear a lot of people, especially in Northern Nevada, who come to check out the facility, like, Matrix is top of the line.
Yep.
Yeah. And they talk about the employees that work there are happy to be there.
Right. That was important to me. Like the corporate culture of it, like I kind of brought what I had learned at Kahunaville, and Kahunaville was modeled after Disney. So, it wasn't as cheesy as Disney, but we had a lot of the cheesiness. But, in a work setting, that's actually pretty cool as long as you're not taking it above and beyond and making people feel uncomfortable and doing things they don't want to do. But, like in Kahunaville, everybody's a cast member. You're not an employee, and when you're going out on the floor, you're going out on stage. You're not, just going to work, shit like that. But it's also a happy, healthy, terrific kind of positive attitude all the time. And that's what we brought in the Matrix too. It was really important to me.
So as you guys get started, what was like the biggest challenge at Matrix? Like what was like the biggest hurdle you think? And this is still a medical market.
Yeah. It was early on. You got to understand these companies are all like self-funded. They're not, you're not going to banks and getting money like that. And people weren't handing money out for this. You're going to private investors that are, these people made their money and they care about their money a lot. So the biggest challenge, honestly, was planning early on, because at first I had partners that were like, let's build out the whole building, man. We don't want to have to build out the rest of this later on after we're up and operational. And so I was like, great. So we designed this facility that was 30,000 square feet. And so then we go to a general contractor and get it all priced out and everything. And it turns out it's going to be 10 million. So then we bring it to the partnership, and they're like, "Oh, let's not build it all out. Let's do half." And so then we come up with a design for half, and that's going to be 6 million. And they're like, "Oh, let's get that down a little lower, down to 4." So like it took so much time just for planning alone, and we hopped from general contractor to general contractor because it just took so much time, and for them, time is money, and you also risk getting a bad reputation in this town. This town is very tight-knit, as everybody knows. And, you start hopping from GC to GC, that's going to get around, and they're not going to want to work with you because they're all basically hiring the same subcontractors to do all these jobs. Yeah. So that was a challenge in itself, just getting to the point of construction. And then the construction was a freaking nightmare. Construction sucks, period.
Yeah.
And so that was a major challenge. And then getting started too. I mean, here's the toughest part for everybody in this town. No one had the power to these buildings, right? So, for a cannabis facility, the amperage is much, much, much higher than what you would normally see in any warehouse in this town. There's just no reason to have that much power in this town. So you have to go to NV Energy and apply and get the power brought to your building. And that takes a lot of time. That took us 2 years. To actually, from the time that we applied to NV Energy to the time that we actually got that power. And it turns out, because they make you set up an entire infrastructure, especially if you're out in the middle of nowhere, which we were. So they made us pull power from 2 different sources, and you're literally fucking trenching and digging up concrete, and one of them was a quarter mile away.
Jesus.
So we had to spend big bucks just on that. But also time. So we have this whole facility built out, and we're just waiting for the power, and so finally the power gets connected, and we're like, go. It was like, because literally we had been, we're running out of runway, we're running out of money, and you got to get up and running and start turning a profit. And so, so we literally filled that. I had a bedroom that I was growing at my house, and these plants that I had for the moms, we were 2 months past schedule. I had planned on us opening in February, and we opened in April.
Of 2015.
And late April. No, 2016.
So February.
I'm sorry, I jumped way ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. We can.
No, so yeah, so basically from November all the way up to when did we start construction? September of 2016. That's when we finally started construction. It took all that time to go through planning and get all this shit done and get the money raised and all this stuff. It just took so long. And, meanwhile, I'm like not even, I've given up my bartending gig at this point, and I'm still wondering if this is ever even going to happen, even though we had a license.
Yeah.
Like it was just such a leap of faith. And I was, there's a lot of reasons why I feel fortunate because, in that period of time, I just remember that being so stressful because I just didn't know, here I am, a guy with this great license and this great opportunity. And like, we're having a problem just getting to the point of construction. And so finally that happened. And so, like I said, I had been growing at home, but I had then at that point dedicated my entire grow room to just grow moms, to just grow mothers. So I'm not flowering or doing anything in there. So I have a big bedroom that's completely dedicated. But again, I was 2 months beyond schedule, and these plants don't say, hey, I'll stop growing for you for 2 months. So like these things were literally hitting my ceiling in the bedroom. But I was able to pull roughly 3,300 cuts off of the plants in the bedroom. Yeah. And that was 12 different strains because you're allowed 12 plants. And so that's actually that was a big challenge for us too, because I remember this. So when we got our initial inspection by the state, and again, you never even meet the state up until that point, right? And so it's like you're nervous as shit.
Yeah.
And, you just spend all this time and energy and money and to get these facilities up and running. And so but the whole thing is like all the plants had to come in through a patient of Nevada, right? And a patient of Nevada is allowed 12 plants, all right? And I have these monsters going on in my house, and there is no way I can move them out. These things were like 9 feet tall. Jesus. All right, they're just gonna fucking flop and break everywhere, and plus I got my neighbors. It just can't. It's undoable. It's not doable. So I say to the state with my attorney right there, I'm like, so I have 12 plants. Would it be legal if I were to cut the branches off of each one of those plants, so it's still one plant, and I put that in a bucket of water and I bring it up here? And they call whoever they call, and they're like, he says you can do it, and I said, you heard that right? And he's like, yep, my lawyer, and he's like, yeah, I heard him. And it's on record. And I said, okay, say no more. And so we literally chopped all these plants up in the room and put them in Home Depot buckets. And this is a great story. It took us, we started that at like really early in the morning. This is how long it took. And we ended up getting finished at like 2 a.m. And so to take that many cuts, because we're just chopping these plants down, put them all in buckets of water. And, so we load them up in the back of my truck. I actually have a picture of this. And it filled up the entire back of my truck with Home Depot buckets. And so we tie them all down, the orange buckets with the lids on them and shit. Yeah. And we tie them all down. And I literally drive all those plants up from Henderson all the way up to North Las Vegas at 2:30 in the morning. And, it was me and my 2 partners, and we have our badges and everything. And I'm kind of like, I kind of hope we get pulled over. I kind of hope so, because this is all legal. Yeah. This is fucking legal, man. Yeah. But we didn't get pulled over. But, so then we got the plants up to the facility and we got them planted. And that's literally was the first harvest that we had was off of those plants. And that's really rare, because you have to acclimate all those plants to your new grow space that you haven't even gotten to test out yet because you didn't even have power.
Yeah.
So we're literally like all these things happening all at once.
Yeah. So it's like everything's new, everything's fresh, all at the same time.
Yeah, all at the same time. And then on top of it, you're trying to bring your plants in clean too, which is a huge deal. Like that killed a lot of companies here. It was just bringing in nasty, dirty plants with powdery mildew or spider mites or you name it. Yeah. A lot of people ran into that. That's a super important thing.
Yeah. And so, and I've heard you talk about this. I think you and me have talked about this. So with the state regulations, when it comes to like microbials and the mildew, how does that all work?
As far as, so everything is tested in a lab.
Yeah.
And you are allowed a certain parts per million of basically anything microbial. And it's very, very low. And that's one of the biggest challenges here in Nevada is that you really can't use a lot of beneficial bacteria that you normally could use in growing environments that don't test for microbes, because Nevada doesn't differentiate between good microbes and bad microbes. They're just all the same thing. So they're like, for example, bacillus. Bacillus is a good bacteria that helps plants grow, and we're not allowed to use it because if it shows up on the tests in the end, it's completely harmless to humans. But if it shows up, we fail. So you have to really figure out a way to grow in Nevada without using beneficial microbes that you normally would use. But then also, the pesticide standards and fungicide standards here are they did it right here. They allow you to use pesticides and fungicides, which, by the way, I do everything not to use. We use natural predators mainly. But if you have to go that route, legally you're allowed to. But the testing standards, the residual levels are so low that it's really hard to use anything, especially something that's a systemic pesticide that stays within the plant or a systemic fungicide that stays within the plant, because that's going to show up on testing. And now Nevada did something even better where they're testing for all of this stuff in the concentrates. So they're testing for pesticides and fungicides and concentrates, which I think is incredibly important, because here's the thing. You can spray something on a plant and it might not show up on the test result, or it might still be lower than the tolerance levels, right? But then you send it through extraction, and what you're doing is you're concentrating everything. You're not just concentrating the cannabinoids, you're concentrating everything that's in that plant, including the pesticides and the fungicides. So you're getting now elevating your levels of pesticides and fungicides. So something that might have failed in or not have failed in flower or trim could easily fail on the other side in the extraction side, because now you've elevated those levels.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why I tell people, because everybody goes to the black market,
Of
and
course.
you
just tried my shitty tool
yeah,
pen.
and it's like, because it's cheaper and you pay taxes. But here's my thing, man. I've been around a lot of growers, and there's a lot of growers that do things right, and that's awesome. And then there's a lot of growers that don't. And how do you know what you're buying on the black market?
Exactly.
Because a lot of these things that they spray on plants, especially in California, California's kind of dirty little secret in the grower world is that powdery mildew is abundant in California, and really the only way of killing off powdery mildew is using this. It's gotten a really bad name. It's a product called Eagle 20, and the chemical is myclobutanol, and that stuff turns to hydrogen cyanide when it's combusted. And people have been using this shit on cannabis for years, because it's safe to use on grapes, it's safe to use on strawberries, it's safe to consume. But in the cannabis world, this is a very unique thing. We have a plant that you're eating and smoking. You're not just doing one or the other. So something that might be safe to spray on something you eat might not be safe to spray on something that you smoke, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of research still needs to be done on all this stuff. I think, by the way, that like this new thing that you're really starting to see now, which I never saw up until recently, where people are getting like this, I forget what it's called, but the THC syndrome, where they're actually getting sick from smoking too much.
Yeah. Like throwing up from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm actually talking to some nurses out there. So I just went through a whole ordeal where I was in hospital last month, and I was fortunate enough to meet some nurses, and we started talking about this stuff. So I've stayed in touch with them because I'm really interested to see if this is actually attributed to weed, or is there something in there that this could be attributed more towards residual pesticides and fungicides within the cannabis, especially with dabs. So I really think that there needs to be a lot of research done before people start pointing the finger at weed. And it very well might be that there is actually this, thing that happens when you get too much THC in you. For certain people, they get this, syndrome where they get nauseous all the time, and the only thing that cures them is a hot shower.
Yeah.
But so I'm excited to see all that research done.
Yeah, and going back to like the pesticides and whatnot, I don't know if you probably seen all the different pens that are coming out of the black market in California.
Oh, yeah.
People, are going to the hospital because of it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
It's
It's dangerous. And that's what people really don't get. And, think about this. You're putting this stuff in your lungs, and you don't know what you're putting in there, especially with concentrates. With flour, yeah, you would probably taste the pesticides and fungicides, maybe not systemic ones, but, if somebody just sprayed something on there before just to kill off some spider mites or something, you're gonna definitely taste that. But with concentrates, you're not. You just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're putting in yourself.
Especially because you could do the botanical terpenes.
That's the other thing,
add
too.
in flavoring.
Yeah, and who the hell knows what that's doing to you? I know that dabbing terpenes is above 700 and some odd degrees. Some certain terpenes turn into carcinogens.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. That is documented now. You can go on Google and Google that shit.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that is true.
So how do you feel about all these terpene companies coming out with all these botanical?
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan either, just because I don't really know what the hell it is.
Right. I don't. Again, we could pull terpenes off of bacon in Matrix. Like you could basically, with our CO2 extractor, you could pull terpenes off of pretty much anything. And so we were like, man, imagine fucking bacon oil. Like, how cool would that be? Like, you fucking do a hit and it tastes like bacon, but is it safe to inhale bacon terpenes? Yeah. I don't know, and so
it sounds cool though.
But I'm seeing stuff out there that's saying, don't take my word as gospel, do your own research. But I'm seeing some stuff out there that's saying that, food grade terpenes are not safe to inhale, and that's what they're using in all of these nicotine products and all these other things. And for me, it's like, when I decided that I wanted Matrix to focus on CO2, one of my the first pen I ever tried was out of Cali. It was Bang, and I was like, wow, this is the greatest fucking thing ever, man. This is so convenient, so awesome.
Yeah.
And I bought a bunch of different strains, and every one of them tasted the same. I was like, well, it's kind of cool. And honestly, I'm only getting like a head high. It just doesn't seem like there's terpenes in it. And sure enough, there wasn't once I learned the process. And so I decided that back then I was like, well, I want to be the guy that really figures out how to get terpenes in the cannabis oil. But I'm not talking fake bullshit terpenes. I'm talking real cannabis derived terpenes. And so that's what we did. We went on a journey to find an extraction company that was capable of doing this, because the majority of them were doing it through steam distillation, and or butane, and obviously we weren't going that route. But so I just figured there was a way, and sure enough, there is. And so we found the right company to work with, and we developed we did a lot of R&D on this for a year, and we developed a way to really extract terpenes using a CO2 process and reintroduce it back into the oil. So that way you don't have to cut it with anything. It's just literally just the cannabis oil and terpenes, and cannabis derived terpenes, and that's what you have in Matrix.
And that's why you can taste the difference. Right?
You taste the difference, dude. Like sour diesel. Have you ever had our sour diesel? It tastes just like the flour. That's what I tell people. And we were early on, we were playing around, and so we had actually started doing some distillate with CO2, and we were making CO2 distillate, and we started reintroducing the terpenes back into that stuff, and I was like, oh my God, this is just stupid. It's so good. So eventually we haven't done that yet at Matrix, but we probably will eventually. But that would be, it's tough to make, your yields are so low in CO2.
Yeah.
That it's tough to turn that into distillate and create a margin. It's actually, I think, impossible. So that would have to be, right now, it would have to be a butane product with CO2 terpenes added in, which still would be killer, but I'm not the biggest fan of the vaping butane.
How do you feel about different, extraction processes, right? And I know we're getting off topic here, but I definitely want to talk about this with you because other people have asked me about this, CO2 extraction, propane, butane,
we're doing butane at Matrix, and my whole thing with butane, and we were doing it. We were in the butane game really early on, and my whole thing was like anything that Nevada allows 500 parts per million of residual butane and other solvents. And I knew, like, when I would see stuff that would test over 100 and I would dab it, I'd taste that butane. And so that was really important to me early on, was that we figured out processes to, and it's really just time. That's really all it is with butane extraction. It's just being patient. And a lot of guys just aren't patient, or they smell, because how you're getting all that butane residual gas off, or residual solvent, is you're basically vacuuming it off, right? You're just sucking it out. And they start smelling terpenes, like in the butane lab. Oh my God, we're burning off terpenes, shut it down, turn it off, take it out. And next thing you know, you've got, 300 parts per million of butane still left over in there. So my whole thing was, get it all out. I don't give a fuck if you smell terpenes or not. It's more important to me to get all that residual gas out, because butane it's a nasty gas.
Oh yeah.
It comes with heptene, this touches me close because my father died of leukemia, and I attribute it strictly. He smoked those fucking chair root cigars, right? And you can look it up. They have a chemical in them called benzene, and benzene is directly related to leukemia. And so what other product out there do you know of that people are inhaling that is extracted through a butane process? I don't know of any. So I question the longevity of this, and whether or not the federal government, once they start regulating cannabis, will they allow butane extraction? Now, maybe, because there are guys out there, there's guys here in the state that do a really good job and get all of those solvents out and produce a very clean, great product through butane. It can be done. But, it's just you got to have the right people doing it, and you got to be patient. So I highly recommend anybody that smokes a lot of dabs or vapes a lot of dabs to just, look at those test results in dispensaries. They're all available for you. And just try and stay away from stuff that's high in residual solvents. It's really it, And I can tell you too, I was dabbing a lot of butane stuff because I really wanted to understand everything I was selling, and God, we were putting out so much fire, and I was like, oh, I gotta try that. But over time, I started getting like this crazy burn in the back of my throat, and I'll tell you, once I stopped doing a lot of dabs that were butane, that stopped. Really? So yeah, and I butane terps are kind of dirty the way that's extracted is, and I think there's a lot of shit left over in that, especially with sauces, because they reintroduce that stuff back in there, and you can just taste it. Like butane terpenes are very different than CO2 terpenes. CO2 are just nice and smooth. Like sometimes you might get like a peppery feeling to them, but nothing like the butane. I personally feel, and my focus is going to be moving forward is solventless. I think that if you've ever had like really good live rosin, nothing better.
Oh yeah.
Nothing better. To me, that's the be all end all to me. So, and there's guys that are doing some really good solventless stuff. You don't see it a whole lot here yet. You will, but that's really going on in California and Colorado too. A lot of guys are really doing really good, like bubble hash and stuff in Colorado that just blows you away.
My buddy Cole always brings me back some live resin or some type of extract, just because it's 10, not that it's 10 times better, but it's a lot. You can taste the difference, and it's just a matter of they've been doing it longer, so they just know the process. A lot
exactly. You have guys that are experts out there. It's just more so out there.
Yeah,
we just don't have that talent pool yet here.
Yeah,
we will.
Yeah, definitely, it's gonna happen.
Right.
So you. Going back, so 2016, you guys are operational, ready to rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
You guys hit the ground running. What was the, strategy? Like, was it like, just get this as many people's hands as possible? You had a strategy, like any strategy, like, you know what I'm saying?
The strategy was, Evan, go meet every single dispensary owner that you can. Literally, that's what it was. And then I hired a guy. I'll give him a shout out. His name was Brett Nelson. Brett's kind of well known in the cannabis industry. So 710 Brett, I think is his name on Instagram or something like that. And a really good dude. And so he and I, like early on, I made a lot of connections very early on. And then I brought Brett into the game, and Brett got us into more and more dispensaries. And it was really just, my strategy was grow really good weed. Just go out and put on the charm offensive, which is, just go meet people and show them who I am and who we are and what we're doing, and try to get our products in on many shelves as we possibly could. That was really it. It wasn't really, we didn't sit and strategize like, we're going to do a lot of radio spots and this and that, or it just, coming from a nightclub and Kahunaville background, we understood promotion in a big way. So I think that was part of our game plan was, early promotions. That's one of the things we were doing really early on before I was seeing many people do them, was pop-up events and dispensaries and stuff like that. And I would do a lot of meet the grower events and things like that.
Yeah.
That was really it. It wasn't really, just go out, be yourself, grow good stuff, and meet people. And that's it.
So fast forward, you become one of the biggest brands in cannabis, right? This, I think the first time I met you was last year, 2017, at Bartender Fight Club. And you were doing a pop-up event, which is really cool. So fast forward to, to now, or, what you're doing the consulting now. What's going on with that?
I was, so when we started Matrix, I actually got an official title of Chief Operating Officer, which is, just under CEO, Chief Executive Officer, which was who ended up being my partner, David. Nice. He was CEO for a while, and I'm no longer COO of the company, and he's no longer CEO. We've both stepped out of those roles. We have all genetics in-house now at Matrix, and it's kind of on cruise control. Everybody's been trained, so I felt it was kind of time for me to grow in a lot of ways and step out of my comfort zone and start a consulting company and started spreading the love and doing what I like to do out there. So that's what I did. So I stepped out of my chief operating officer role in Matrix, and so I'm really no longer part of the day-to-day operation up there anymore. And so now I've started consulting I started a company called Red Ram Consulting, which is my last name spelled backwards, not Mader, Marder.
Yeah, Marder.
And so it's REDRAM Consulting. And so that's what I've done. I started working. I was working on a project out in Oklahoma actually for a while.
Oh, nice.
That was from August to December. I was constantly out in Oklahoma.
Flying back and forth.
Yeah, dude, that was an experience. Yeah, because I was staying in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I got to learn a lot about cows and backcountry stuff. And I'm from Pennsylvania, but back in Pennsylvania, everything's dairy cattle and nothing. This was all for meat and stuff like that. So I got to eat a lot of really good steaks out there, and make a lot of really cool drives through the Oklahoma countryside. And this grow that I was working on is in Stillwell, Oklahoma, which is Cherokee Nation. Mm-hmm. Totally different world, man. And so I was flying into Fayetteville, which is where the University of Arkansas is, and staying in Fayetteville, and then driving 45 minutes to Stillwell, Oklahoma, which is like literally middle of nowhere. But it was cool, man. It was pretty cool. And now I'm back in Vegas. And so they actually wanted me full time out there, and this is kind of funny for me because they offered me $250,000 salary a year, and I was like no. I was like, I love Las Vegas, man. I mean, so I can literally say that $250,000 a year couldn't draw me away from this town. I just freaking love it here.
What's the number, just in case anybody wants to offer you that number? Just so you have it on your record.
$1 million.
Okay.
Yeah, I would probably do it for $1 million.
Just so if you want the best cannabis and extracts in the world,
yes.
$1 million is going to get you that.
Yes, I would do that for $1 million a year. That's what it would take. If it was somewhere pretty cool, maybe less, but Stillwell, Oklahoma. $1 million. Yeah.
Is it still well or is it still water?
Stillwell.
Stillwell.
Yeah. STILWELL. Great people.
Yeah.
I met a lot of really cool people out there, and so nothing against that. I just love Las Vegas. Everything about it here. I just love it. Even
702, baby.
That's it, baby. I'm dialed in.
We were talking about that today, how much we love Vegas.
Yeah. We were just walking downtown, and it's just an amazing.
Dude, I'll tell you, my fandom even, I'm a huge Philadelphia fan, and I'm really into hockey. So I grew up a Flyers fan, and
nice.
I used to go to Flyers games. That's honestly going to Eagles, Flyers, and Phillies games is the thing that I miss most about being back east where I'm from. But I'll tell you, man, I'm on the Knights bandwagon, dude. I dropped the Flyers jersey. I wouldn't really ever tell my friends back east that, but dude, I'm like, so I just went through a month of hell where I had a kidney stone. And I was like, all right, I had to say, no, it's all good, and I won't kill you with those details because, dude, every one of my buddies that I tell about this, their assholes cringe up and they don't want to talk to me anymore, man. Because it was nasty what I went through. But I got a fucking Xbox. All I could do was sit. And do nothing. So I got an Xbox and I got an NHL 2019 because I used to be way into that stuff back in the day. Yeah. And so now I'm back in the NHL 2019 and guess who I'm playing as? I'm playing as the Golden Knights. So yeah.
That's a badass game.
It's bad, dude. Yeah, I'm 19 and 16. I went to the pro level and I'm just getting my ass kicked. It sucks.
Me and my friends used to play in college a lot, NHL, just because you can fight each other.
It's the best. It's the best, man. It's the best video game to play against each other. That and Madden, but Madden stop and go, yes. And this game is just constant. Yeah, it's so much fun. Your hands end up hurting a little bit, but it's awesome.
So we had talked about it before the podcast, but tell us, about that name. Obviously, it's your
the Red Ram.
Yeah, Red Ram. Yeah, sorry.
So obviously that's my last name, but it has a cool spelling backwards. It's Red Ram, and so. This is there's a lot of family history with that name being spelled backwards. I had a great aunt who was a very famous madam back in the 30s and 40s, and she owned a bunch of brothels from Pennsylvania all the way out to Chicago. And so at one point she was in Pennsylvania in the snow, and unfortunately she went off a cliff in a car and died. And my grandparents took over the one brothel that she had going on. And back then, brothels weren't. I don't know what brothels are now, but I don't know where I was going with that.
They're illegal in Nevada.
Yeah, exactly. So, but back then they were basically speakeasies with a burlesque show in the back, and so my grandparents ended up taking that over when my dad was a little kid, and the police raided it one night, and my grandmother, I guess, for years the people who were running it, I guess, didn't give up where anything was, or they just didn't get busted. But my grandmother told them where the burlesque was in the back. That was always kind of like a funny family story we had over the years, and everybody was kind of pissed at my grandmother, poor woman. But they busted it and shut it down. But so my grandfather, this is kind of cool. My grandfather had, I think I come from a family of normal perverts, I guess you could say. We're not fucked up in any way and have weird fetishes, but we like women, and So he had all these black and white pictures of all the burlesque dancers. like posing and stuff.
That's
like,
super baller.
yeah, it was, dude. So like when we would go, I remember this as a kid, man, and like he had a big walk-in closet, and he had like all these pictures in a box, and I would sneak into that closet, and I would like just sit there and look at all the pictures. And honestly, I was so young, probably didn't even know why I wanted to look at them. I just knew I wanted to look at them, and so I would do it, man. It was awesome, and so I still remember those. Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of the history. And so when I started this this consulting company, just again, trying to think of a name, and my mom was like, "Call it Red Ram." I was like, "Yeah, okay, that's actually a great idea." So that's what I did.
Yeah, it's a great name.
Thank you. Yeah, and the logo is like, I've come up with a pretty cool concept for it, and I don't think there's anything really in it in cannabis. So I would love to eventually launch that brand name too.
Definitely.
I think it could do well. It could do well.
Are you? So what's the next move? Next move for you?
It's a great question. I'm actually trying to figure that out. I'm actually a free agent right now, and I'm shopping. And so
He's a free agent, everybody.
Yes, I am a free agent right now.
We got the Tom Brady of cannabis in the building.
Like, that's awesome. Yeah. So, I just got to get that many trophies. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing right now. I've kind of entertained some offers, but nothing really that I'm moving forward on yet. I'm being brought what I didn't anticipate was that I'm being brought a lot of ancillary outside products that or companies are coming to me like, hey, can you introduce us? Can you work with us? And kind of just, I think for all these companies, the hardest thing is to meet these people.
Oh yeah.
To meet everybody.
Always.
And so I'm getting approached by a lot of people that run different types of companies that would feed the cannabis market, some of which are really good ideas. So I'm probably going to start picking up on some of those things and running with them. I actually had a great meeting today with a company that is in doing drying racks and stuff like that. And, that's one of the things. You go to these cannabis events like the MJ BizCon, which I've been going to for years now, and it's getting better and better, but there was never really stuff that really that was really good for the commercial growers, and there was nothing really innovative, and so it's kind of boring, but you're starting to see it now. And these guys, I think, that I talked to today actually have a great idea, and that's one of the things that's not really touched on is dry cure process, and which is equally as important as growing the plant itself.
Yeah.
And so that's something I'm looking at doing too, possibly. But again, I want to start growing again. Is really where I want to be.
You want to be back in the saddle.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yep. So maybe, who knows? I know there's a big 400,000 square foot grow coming up here. You guys know about that?
I actually did hear about that.
Flower One. Yeah, I'm giving them a shout out. Yeah. So they are building a giant 450,000 square foot facility, 400,000 of which, and that's massive. That's 400,000 of which is dedicated to cultivation, and this place has a glass roof. So,
wow.
Yeah, they're gonna do some damage. They're gonna definitely lower the price of flower in this town. And they can grow really good stuff in there too. They could really drive some prices down. The thing about a building of that size, because they're just wide open. Yeah. They're not building small rooms. It's really hard to grow really, really quality bud in those places, and be consistent with it. But, we'll see what they do. It's going to be interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of cultivation coming on still.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's what's so crazy about the market is there's so many, there's so much to be developed still.
Dude, I don't even think we're at a quarter of what it's going to be.
I think a quarter is very not conservative.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Because I know some of these places coming on, and like everybody's building out, especially the guys just got the new dispensary licenses.
Yeah. There's
going to be a lot of cultivation.
Social use permits. I mean, there's going to be a lot more consumption too. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we need a lot more flower.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's an issue right now for people.
Right. Yeah. Consumption lounges, I think, once those get popular, that will boost the demand here pretty greatly. I mean, especially for tourists, if you have stuff where people are going on the strip regularly to smoke, oh my God.
Especially if it's a restaurant style or high end nightclub type of thing.
Yep.
So
yeah, you'll see it, man. You're going to see it all. It's all going to come here eventually.
Where do you think the patients end up in this whole process?
That's tough. Nevada. I hate to say this, but like it's so money driven in this state that and that's a really sad part of this is that they're probably. I don't really know how to answer it at this point. I still think that they will keep the prices low for patients. Like I hope they don't change the tax laws for patients. I mean, and as long as they don't do that, then we're good because we don't have those crazy laws like Colorado does to where when we grow it, we have to determine whether it will be sold medical or recreational when it's being grown. Mm-hmm. That gets decided at point of sale.
Yeah.
So, That's what's going to kill it in other states. I honestly hadn't given that a whole lot of thought lately, but as long as they don't, change the tax rate, patients won't get hurt in that sense. But as far as edibles and stuff like that, you're going to see a lot less of those 500 milligram, 1,000 milligram bars out there because you can't sell it recreationally.
Right. Yeah, and they're getting scarce right now.
Dude. I mean, honestly, knowing the market, people just don't buy them that much.
Yeah,
and it's a real shame because there's people that legitimately need this stuff, and that's the real shame of it. So I wouldn't be opposed to a law that kind of like if you own an edible company, a certain percentage has to be dedicated to medical products, stuff like that, or at least carve out something to where you are making sure that product is getting fed into the market somehow, some way. It's tough because it's capitalism, man, and everybody is out there doing what they need to do to survive because believe it or not, none of these companies are really making great money right now, especially if I know I'm not crying wolf or crying at all, but like especially when you own just a cultivation, if you're not vertically integrated to where you own grow, production, and dispensary, you are at a massive disadvantage, man, because on both sides of it, because you have to be vertically integrated, especially because of the tax laws. Because it's federally illegal, we deal with a code called 280E. And 280E basically says that you can't write off cost of goods sold. And so that's a bitch because for any business, if you can't write off cost of goods sold, so essentially we're taxed at about a 70% rate as opposed to like a 30 to 40% rate that a normal or whatever a normal business is taxed at. So it's tough. It's really tough. And then throw in the fact that you have all these licensing fees. We just got hit for the $120,000 just to North Las Vegas, for the year, just for our licenses, 120 grand, because they make you pay for the medical and the recreational. Course. So so they better freaking damn well, because they're doing that, they should really implement ways that it's guaranteed that patients can get what they need. But again, all of us are out there trying to survive too, and it's like the state isn't gonna if you're failing, you're failing. It's not like they're gonna throw you a life jacket. That's it. So it's tough. I mean, a lot of these companies are smaller, and it's hard to justify continuing to sell something that's A, you're not getting your margins on, and B, there's just not a whole lot of demand for it. So hopefully we don't see a change in that, because I'll tell you honestly, as a medical patient, I love those 500 milligram bars. But seriously, they're needed. They're really needed. A cancer patient, stage 4 cancer patient, needs one of those bars at once.
It's medicine.
Yes, absolutely it is.
Where are we at time wise right now, Chuck? I know we've been here for a minute talking, and I want Okay, cool.
Hour 15, yeah. I mean, you have such a beautiful story of struggle, perseverance, getting the ball down the field. I'm sure it probably started with cannabis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through that process, did you just fall in love with the fight, right? And
yeah, addicted to it. I've always been addicted to action. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I've always needed something going on. It's kind of funny because I'm also a homebody and I like sitting on my ass too, but I just need something. I get hungry. And so, and cannabis this has been the ultimate for me, because this is my dream. This is everything I've been passionate about. And lucky me, I've gotten involved in the industry too and made a name for myself in it. So I mean, I'm living the dream, for sure.
Well, I think we could probably wrap it up. Listen, we
definitely.
appreciate you having us, man.
It's my pleasure. I want to do this like 50 million times.
I do. Can we get you back on?
Hell yeah.
So we're gonna.
I'll be a host.
I'm down. You can ask me questions. Today's March 20th. I want you back on in 3 months from today.
No problem. I'm there.
And I just want to know what's going on.
Hopefully everybody else wants me there too.
No, they're gonna want. 3 months from now, we'll have a way bigger audience. People want to check out and just want to know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Because you are a big player in the Nevada cannabis industry and the cannabis industry at large, right? So.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, dude, I'm honored to be sitting here with you.
It's funny because like I'm just normal and I sit at home and like no one's calling me being like, dude, you're the man, or anything like that. It's just like I really appreciate the stuff when I come out, because honestly I don't really get out a whole lot. So hearing these things and going to events and having people approach me, it's so It's awesome.
You're a rock star.
Yeah, thank
brother.
you. You know, that's all I ever wanted to be. Honestly, like if that's true, then I'm truly living my dream. Because growing up, that's what I wanted to be. I either wanted to be a rock star or a Tony Montana. So seriously,
So you're both right now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's perfect. I combined the two, and yeah, I used to pray. I was like, God, make me Tony Montana. Just don't let me get killed, please. You gotta understand. I would do that. Scarface came out when I was 13. I mean, you know, that as a 13-year-old boy seeing that movie, I was like, oh my God, women, drugs, this looks awesome. So
just the end sucked.
yeah, you know, but he brought it on himself.
Yeah, you go out in glory.
Yeah, I don't fuck people over, so you know I should be good. You know, that's it. He fucked them over. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And you'll fuck with me.
That back east mentality. Wait, what are you, Irish?
No. So my mom's side is German. They're what's called Pennsylvania Dutch, which means that they are from Germany, but they've been in Pennsylvania, probably in like the 1600s. My father's side, they came over during World War I, and that was Russian and Ukrainian. Okay. Or actually, I'm sorry, Austrian and Ukrainian. My grandfather's from Austria, and grandmother was Ukraine.
Yeah, you just have this really cool, big, like, back east, like mentality, energy about you. You know what I'm saying?
Nice. That's a compliment. I'll take it.
My father, my father's from Syracuse. My mom's from Brooklyn. Yep. So like, yeah. So like,
if you know the Beastie Boys, you know that.
Oh yeah, and so like, you know, just being around that type of energy feels good. So that's what you know.
Cool.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, man. Anytime.
Thank you guys so much for checking it out. You wanna plug anything?
On Instagram you can follow me at Thank you. Follow me at evan.matrix.mmj. Evan.matrix.mmj. You can also see my consulting email on that same Instagram page, and that's really the only social media I'm really promoting at this point. So, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. That was episode 3, guys, of the Culture and Cannabis podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you to Evan. Thank you to this old guy, Jeffrey Charles. Learned that that's his name today. And we'll see you at the next episode. Peace.
Awesome. Peace.